If you look at any centre-left political party around the world, or heaven forbid any further to the left political party around the world, they have one policy. They have one solution. Doesn't matter what the problem is. They have one solution for it. Raise taxes. Just think about it. If you have a housing shortage, what's the solution that they propose? Raise taxes. If you have, a problem with cost of living, raise taxes. If you have a problem with the grocery stores being out of control, raise taxes. If you have a problem with climate change, raise taxes. Name for me a single issue that the Labor Party or the Democrats or anybody else who is on the left has actually faced where the solution that they have come up with has been something other than raising taxes.
Look, very excited to get into today's show because we've got a lot to talk about. We actually started, we've just finished another show, which some of the subject matter I think flows into today. So we will cover that as well as we go. But right now, I'll throw straight to you, Derek. Let's jump into the show, mate.
It's been a big week on the Australian political front. Now, remember, three things affect the economy, the stock market, and that is politics, economy, and interest rates.
And me.
The Albanese government has basically broken its promise to the Australian public to not tamper with the stage 3 tax cuts that it said it would.
I can't imagine Albanese not telling the truth.
These are coming in from the 1st of July. And what they've basically done is adjust the rates. It was going to be a very simplified rate for most income earners within Australia. And it was going to be at a bracket that was around the 30% mark for those earning from $45,000 up to $190,000. It's going to be a straight 30%. And what they've come in and said, oh, no, we're going to adjust it. We're going to tax the more higher income ones from $135,000 to $190,000 and reintroduce this 37% tax bracket. Now, of course, what they're doing is getting the majority in there and saying, yeah, we're going to tax the rich sort of thing.
But that's not rich.
Exactly. That's not
tradespeople.
And you also line that up against inflation. We had the show last week where, 100,000 is the new $60,000. This is what they're not considering here. Okay, the people who are in those lower tax brackets get a bit of a break, and that's fantastic. But that was planned anyway. This is on the back of course, the booing of at the Australian Open, and I will give it that ScoMo was also booed at the Australian Open. So the conservative tennis crowd does like to boo its politicians when they go up to present trophies. But this is a backflip. It is going to be interesting. Liberals going to take advantage of this and say, "Hey, you broke your promises." This is another one to kind of rub their noses in and say this. But why is this being done? Well, obviously the government has spent a lot of money. It's got a bit of a cash flow issue, and it's a
massive cash flow issue.
Yeah, huge tax flow issues, and so we're going to tamper with the tax 3 rather than just let the economy try to correct it and fix it itself and do free enterprise.
Because we're going to election in less than 12 months. He's got to be seen to be doing something. So he's trying. And from my political opinion on this one, he's doing exactly what Scott Morrison did to lose the last election to Albanese. Albanese just shut up, went in, did his thing, and he didn't do anything. He just wasn't there. He didn't exist. It's sort of like Biden when he was hiding in his basement. So when you're not talking to people, you can't stuff up. So, and I have to say on this one, the Liberals actually don't need to do anything. The media is destroying Albanese for them. I think Peter Dutton, if he came out and actually started trying to I think it actually backfire on him. I think he's just keeps doing what he's doing, focusing on the cost of living side of things. But my brother's a Sparky. If he was house bashing, so that's just building new houses, he would start $130,000 a year. So plumbers are roughly the same. Painters are even more. It's just, I do not know a trade that wouldn't be affected by this. And you have a think about how many tradespeople we actually have in Australia. This is probably one of the most stupid and retarded bills that I've ever heard of.
Especially when you've got a housing issue in Australia. They've let in 500,000 migrants in. There's not enough houses and infrastructure. Let the economy fix it, okay? don't tax those who can build houses.
And we need to get the government out of the approval process.
Exactly. And I also see this as a back foot play by the Labor government because, of course, it's got egg on its face after the referendum. How many millions of dollars has it wasted on an issue that most Australians are going, get lost?
It was a non-issue in the first place. It was not needed. Like, there was absolutely nothing needed with it.
The historical stuff, and Shaq, I'd love your input on this. If you look at a bit of a case study when Trump got into power, one of the things he does was lower the company tax rate. He also gives big international firms a holiday tax break to get money offshore back into the country, saying, you know, I want these iPads made on American shores. You know, keep in mind, America was coming out of recession. Now, I know it's a bigger economy. I know it's a different circumstances, and Australia is very much, in terms of GPD, small fry compared to the United States. But it's interesting to see that when taxes are lowered, how the economy then is pushed along. We have an issue of labor shortages, so I know why they're trying to bolster this, but it's imploding in the fact that they don't have the infrastructure. Now you've burdened the people with a bit of a tax cut on top of inflation. How's this going to play out? How do you see this, Shaq?
Well, first of all, it's terrible tax policy. And I'll just give you one example as to why. Before the incredible Lady Ardern became the Prime Minister of New Zealand had a flat tax rate. They had 30% flat taxes and a 15% GST. No capital gains tax at all, okay? And so you would ask the question, did they raise more money or less money as a percentage of their GDP than Australia? They raised more. We were taking around 27% of our GDP, and New Zealand was raising about 33%. So whose tax plan is the best? Well, I would argue New Zealand's one was. What you tend to find is those countries with more simplified tax codes where it's easier to comply, and it's indirect taxation, things like consumption taxes, which is basically a GST or a sales tax or a VAT or something like that. Those tend to be the countries that thrive with innovation. When you look at countries that are trying to grow, what do? They often will set up what's called a special economic zone or a free trade zone. They give special tax treatment to foreign investors that wish to invest into the country and create jobs. So what do we do in Australia? Do we incentivize Australians to invest in Australia? Not really, because if you're a successful Australian, you must have gotten that success off of the back of the poor, right? It's because there's so many homeless people that you're so successful, seems to be the thinking. So they'll punish hardworking Australians and give tax breaks to foreign countries and foreign companies. This just makes no sense. This is why I personally invest, I'm digressing, but this is why I personally invest in many other countries, because I can take advantage of special tax treatment like I can't when I'm back in Australia. But it comes back to the point that I've been making for years. If you look at any centre-left political party around the world, or heaven forbid any further to the left political party around the world, they have one policy. They have one solution. Doesn't matter what the problem is. They have one solution for it. Raise taxes. Just think about it. If you have a housing shortage, what's the solution that they propose? Raise taxes. If you have, a problem with cost of living, raise taxes. If you have a problem with the grocery stores being out of control, raise taxes. If you have a problem with climate change, raise taxes. Name for me a single issue that the Labor Party or the Democrats or anybody else who is on the left has actually faced where the solution that they have come up with has been something other than raising taxes. This is a party full of idiots that is voted for by people who have absolutely no understanding of anything other than, oh, well, I'll just take it from them. It doesn't work like that. Grow up and do something with your life. And if you're in politics, grow up and take some responsibility for actually making the changes. Don't just go around blaming everybody else.
Yep.
Go on.
So one
Sorry,
thing
did I sound a little bit pissed off there?
Oh, you should be. One thing I encourage as many people as they can. They need to educate themselves about the systems that they're in. And it really irritates me when people turn around and say, oh, this corporation didn't pay tax or that one didn't pay tax. And they're talking about income tax. Other than income tax, just so the listeners can actually understand what a business has to deal with, especially when it's a major corporation. How many other taxes and hidden charges do they have to deal with on a daily basis which are not included in income tax? Because straight off the bat, I can think of payroll tax. I can think of the staff wages tax, GST that they're paying, their staff that they're paying their wage. On top of that, they've got the super they've got to pay. I think we're up to 12% or something now. Then they've got their own personal income tax as well. So
and not to mention all the fixed costs you have to run a business as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing for a small business, and I'm talking like 1 or 2 employees to burn 10 grand just like that, just to keep the doors open. It's nothing.
And if you have a look at how much your insurance, especially when you're running a business, the cost of your insurance as a business versus your cost as an individual. So I've been helping out with a strata company at the moment, and you have a look at what it costs to insure a strata company versus what it costs per house to insure your personal residence is insane. It's like a good 30-40% extra.
Yep.
So plus what does it cost for licensing?
Yeah.
Right. There's another hoop that you have to jump through is you need to get licensing for all these things.
Well, have a look at this directly below us, just here, PPCA and the number and the APRA license. So we're our Edge Radio as well, because we've fully complied with, unlike other digital radio stations where they just send it offshore, we've actually fully complied with Australian copyright laws. And YouTube and Facebook still annoy the shit out of me because they keep copyright striking us, even though we're legally allowed to play all this music. So that's probably our biggest expense. That and rent at the moment is the biggest expenses for rent for Edge at the moment, and it's insane.
I think also what's happened in this taxation debate is the whole thing of negative gearing is coming up again. Now, it hasn't been ruled on. And you think about this, guys, how crazy the proposal to punish the property investor who's negatively geared. You do this, it's crazy. I'll tell you why. All right, who wins in the equation?
Oh, the banks.
Right, the banks win, the tenant wins, the government win because they don't have the responsibility to provide housing for that individual. They actually have a private investor doing that for them. Who else wins? The property managers win, right? Everyone wins except the negatively geared investor because they're losing money on the deal. That's why it's negatively geared. Now, when you've got a government who's gone, oh, we'll let in 500,000 immigrants into the country, you need every negatively geared property investor you can find right now, because if you say negative gearing is out, they'll go, fine, we'll sell the properties. Boom, you've lost tons of housings and potential rentals to be able to do that. And they're already punishing, might I say, property investors in some areas like in Victoria, where they're not allowing, and they're trying to introduce this into WA here as well, they're not allowing landlords to have Airbnbs. Now, think about that for a moment, right? They can only have an Airbnb for 3 months of the year. This is because they want to help sort the crisis. And you go, well, where's the freedom in the person who has gone to the expense and taken the risk of buying this property and going into this investment, and suddenly you're changing the rules on dynamics and saying, the numbers may have been crunched when they did the deal, saying, yes, if we do this as an Airbnb deal, this will be profitable. And then they're positively geared, and they're going to be forcing positively geared property investors to be negatively geared, where they're now losing money. They'll be forced to sell. You're going to cause problems in the property market if you do this and get rid of negative gearing.
So this is a tough one because Airbnb won't solve the housing price problem. The biggest problem at the moment is, and as the Facebook user said, I think the reports come out, 700,000 people came into the country. So the government only built housing, or sorry, I shouldn't say they approved housing for 175,000 people. So this isn't taking into account natural birth rates or growth of the country naturally. This is purely for the immigration side of things. Obviously, we've got people passing away, so they don't need the houses. It's just the biggest argument at the moment, and I'm going through this at the moment. We're trying to get permits and approvals and all that sort of stuff. It is next to impossible because there's so many people. Also, they know how bad it is at the moment, so there's all these other people trying to get these approvals and permits to get through the council. The councils are knocking back all these approval permits. So even going so far as to build a granny flat in your backyard to help out for like a family member so they can have a home, you can't do it. The councils are probably the biggest hurdle at the moment for property development.
Not just that as well, but if you start saying that landlords can only lease out their property for Airbnb for 3 months of the year, you're going to affect the tourism sector as well. You want money coming into the country to spark the economy. You need Airbnb to do so, right? You need bigger families because, look, look at my
You
family. I've
wouldn't-
got 4 kids.
Yeah.
Do you know how impossible it is to get a room in a hotel, motel where we all can stay in the same room? It's really hard to find that and to house us for a week or so. You have to go to Airbnb to do so because we're a large family. You're going to cut so much more of the market in terms of tourism if you do that.
The biggest problem with that is there's no point having an Airbnb for 3 months of the year.
Ooh.
Because you got to advertise it prior to that.
Yep.
And if you're only doing it for 3 months a year in this market, I don't know anyone who would accept a 12-month rental. Like they'll take anything because they need a house, but I'll guarantee you most of them are like 2 or 3 year rental leases. You'd be crazy not to do anything more because they can just kick you out at any time. So then you've got someone in a house for 9 months, they get kicked out, they go Airbnb for 3 months and they go into a long-term lease again. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So the other one is, especially when you're going into strata or apartment complexes, a lot of the stratas have bylaws to say what you can and can't do with those properties. So a lot of them will actually say no Airbnb allowed in that complex. So that's another thing when you are buying investment property. If it's in a complex or if it's a strata property, read the bylaws. The amount of people I'm talking to at the moment, they're buying properties and they're going, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. And it's like, well, did you read the bylaws? It should be part of your settlement documents. And they're not actually reading it. And this is why I'm saying education is super important.
And any property with a restricted covenant on that, read the fine print really carefully. I looked at a beautiful property down Yellingup Way last year, and it was or the year before, can't remember, 12, 18 months ago, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Perfecto. And but what the problem was is that it was on a restricted covenant, so you can't paint the house a different color other than what's stated. You know, it had to be blue and gray. You couldn't actually have the kids leave their toys out the front. The bins couldn't be left out the front. The kids, you know, I saw it, I said, this is rife for problems with the family. Kids leave toys out everywhere. You know,
don't come to my place.
Do you want the strata kicking up a fuss because they've left their tricycle out overnight?
There's been a heap of law changes on that as well.
Crazy.
Because any strata bylaws that are considered discriminatory, like against children or people or whatever, they are no longer enforceable. So,
but it's
even if they're in the bylaw, so that's where it gets really, really complicated.
And where it gets complicated too is like if you want to put a granny flat out the back, well, it has to be within the width of the house to hide it from the street. And you're like, you know, this property that I was looking at, it's on 4 or 5 acres of land, and basically you can't do anything with that 4 or 5. It's just gardening. It's just crazy.
So we do have a comment here. Take away negative gearing worked so well when Keating did it. Rents went up, vacancies went down, interest rates rose, that and fringe benefit tax tipped Australia into a recession. So it's I think negative gearing is stupid because I just don't see the point in not owning an asset, like not paying it off. And like I know there's ways you can make it work. I just think it is fraught with peril. You're never actually paying it off. And when the loan comes due, let's say you do go negative gearing for 5 years, and then you plan, you know what, I'm going to refinance a house in 5 years. But with me, during that 5 years, let's say you have a motorbike accident and you're no longer able to work. How you don't afford to do that refinancing? All of a sudden, you're stuck with a house you can't get rid of.
I totally agree with you, Travis. I mean, we saw that when the property market went flat, and then suddenly all these negative geared property investors that I had been working with are saying, why am I doing this? I'm working hard so that everybody else can benefit. And yes, as an investment thing, one of the things we teach our students at Blu Sky Factory is you never do an investment for a tax break. You do an investment because you think it's going to make you money. If you get a tax break, that's a bonus, right? And this is a problem. But if you all have a situation as government where you've already got a ton of negatively geared property investors already, and you take that away from them, you're going to cause major issues in the real estate market if you do so. Not just for the investor, but for the tenants who are in that property as well, because suddenly they've got to deal with a new owner,
landlord, new plan, new relationship. Now, the other thing as well is how many people, especially when you're in real estate, like if you in Australia, the tenant actually has more rights than the owner of the property, which is really bad. But so what happens is you're always happening to upgrade to make sure the property meets certain standards. So the standards for a tenanted property is way stricter than what it is for a normal residence. So, for example, if you have to go and do the roof at the moment, you're starting at $15,000. So most positively geared properties, if you have to do one major form of like repairs to the house, all of a sudden that positively geared house is straight away into a negatively geared house. So obviously you get your tax deductions. there's enough deductions just on a standard property as it is that you don't need to negatively gear a house to make money or get the tax breaks. You've got that many tax breaks there anyway. Doesn't
And
matter.
you know, even the small things that people don't really account for unless you are a property investor are things like, you know, the tenant complains that there are too many cockroaches on the property. I had that situation where we had
Pest
a lot of
control is their problem.
well, here was the thing, right? I lived in that house. I knew that every spring the roaches were out, and it's simply because there was a bit of bush in the thing, and it looked pretty and beautiful. All you had to do is get a border spray and spray it around the property. $9, right? They want to the property manager wants to bring in a professional pest controller, and you're going to be back $220 to $250 at those rates. I'm sure it's gone up now, and you're going you have a lot of those little expenses incur here, there. You're exactly right. You've gone from positive geared to negatively geared if you're not careful of managing those expenses.
Yep. And if you've got a good accountant, they'll have a depreciation schedule for you. So you'll all the stuff when you repaint, change the doors and all that sort of stuff, you can tax it off over years anyway. So Shaq, you're back. You know you owe 2 cartons now.
Yeah, except I've got no choice. I'm overseas, so I have to keep my phone on. I sort of weigh in on a couple of the comments here. So I'm not as averse to negative gearing as you guys are. I would suggest that you probably shouldn't negative gear your entire income away, but the idea that you might negative gear some properties, especially when those properties have that amortization schedule on the building itself, that could fit. It depends on how high your income is and what your position is.
And how many properties you have.
About what happens if you have an accident or something, well, you should have insurance and that sort of stuff. So a financial planner should have sat down and made sure that you're in the right position and you're going to be safe if your conditions change before they put you into a negative gearing type scenario. I'll also just make the note that negative gearing, the way that people think about it, is when you are paying more in interest and you never pay off the principal on a property. But that's not the only way of effectively negative gearing an investment. If you pay off interest by borrowing money to buy shares, for example, and you never actually pay back the loan, you just pay interest on it in the hope that the shares, or if you take an index or something, in the hope that index will continually increase by more than the rate of inflation, then that could be a strategy that would work for you. And of course, the super rich, we know, borrow then against the equity that they have, which creates a situation where the interest on those loans are tax deductible. Their income doesn't exist because it's a loan, and so they're not paying any tax. So these are some advanced tax strategies that some of the super rich and their accountants use. I don't have too much of a problem with that, to be perfectly honest. And back to the point about government passing certain rules and laws and all this sort of stuff. You said before something that you and I have both said, I think, on previous shows about learn the system you're in. I think you should pay attention to what the politicians are doing. And as much as you don't like it, there's always some segment of society that's going to benefit from it. And what you do is you simply move your money to those segments of the society that are most going to benefit from those rules, no matter how ridiculous they are. Last point I just want to very quickly make. I don't know exactly what the rules are that you just said about strata rules, being deemed to be unenforceable if they're, potentially discriminatory. Certainly we would hate to see our strata companies turn into the debacle that HOAs are in the United States. But define defamatory then. Does that mean that I can just say that I'm not white, so I culturally, need to have my rubbish out the front? You know what I mean? Like, because we're seeing a society now where we're being told that it's racist for you expect to have people show up on time because for some people time is fluid, all this other shit. So, maybe I should just start. Maybe I'm on the wrong side here. Maybe I should join the wokesters and just go, yeah, look, I need special treatment.
Please don't.
Let me just add.
I don't think I can. I just don't think
on.
I'll be able to pull it off with a straight face. But, I can give it a go for us. I've started with the skirt already.
You're not that good an actor, mate. I'm telling you right now.
Let me just add something to the whole property investment. Most property investors own one house.
Yes,
right?
good point.
Huge percentage.
70% of them own it. Then there's 4% of those property investors who own more than 4 houses. So I agree with you in principle. Yes, if you have multiple properties, then okay, you've got some that are offsetting others in terms of the negative geared and all that sort of stuff.
If you've
but
got
most mum and dad investors own the one, 70% of them.
if you're own more than one property, you really should be doing the courses that you have at Blu Sky Factory, because they shouldn't be in your name in the first place. So, and that's where having the financial education to actually understand how and where you should be storing your property and your assets, and what you can do with them, what you can't do with them. Some of the complicated things that Shaq was saying about lending against houses to buy shares, which makes them negative geared. I have no idea you could do that. I'm dealing with this sort of shit every day. So this is why it's really important to get an understanding of the basics, at least the basics, so you know, right, you know what, this is out of my league. I'm going to go talk to Shaq on how to do this.
Education.
I'm going to go talk to Derek to deal with this. No one's the best at everything, and understanding you're not the best. So go find the best to get the best outcome for you and your family.
Thoroughly agree.
So, I'm not a property guy, but I will say that, you know, one of the techniques that people will use is that they will try to pay off their personal home. This is why a lot of people negative gear, because let's say you own 2 investment properties, right? Say you own a house, your missus owned a house when you both got together, you decided to keep those houses, and you moved in together to a new house that you bought together. So you've got the income coming from the other 2 houses. Well, you may as well put them on interest-only loans. There's nothing to stop you from offsetting that anyway, and putting all of the money that you can against your residential house that you're living in. Why? Because the loan, the interest payment on the loan on the house that you're living in is not going to be tax deductible, and it's not tax deductible because when you sell the property, it's tax free. For now it is, right? So because that's the case, you only get the tax benefit against your investment properties. It would make no sense to pay off your investment properties if you still have a mortgage on your main house. So this is the big problem, though, which is why I think myself, Stephen Pettis, Derek, Warren, and many others in this field talk about making sure that you've structured your assets properly with advice from tax advisors and people that can help you. Because the major problem that you have is that you make your plans based on what the rules are, and just like that, the government can say, you know what you thought belonged to you now belongs to us because we need more money, because we think we can spend it better than you can, or because we've overspent, we need more, right? And then they change it. That's what we've just seen them do with superannuation. That's effectively what they're doing when they say they're going to raise the income tax, or they're not going to introduce the tax reduction from the 1st of July. They've talked about having an inheritance tax. They've also talked about making it taxable, the profit on your primary residence, if you go over a certain threshold. And without giving the same lecture I just gave about the Labor Party always having the same idea for every problem, which is to just increase taxes. So no matter how you structure yourself, they're going to come after you. So you have to be very smart, see what's coming, and then try to move your assets around. Now, for a lot of people, this is a moot point because a lot of people don't have the sort of assets that they need to structure. But I will just say this, and I'll just leave it at this: no matter who you are, if you're on an average income in this country, I think it's about $70,000 a year is the average wage. So that would imply that you're paying about $20,000 a year in tax, in just income tax. Forget about all the others. So that would imply that over your lifetime, you're going to spend about $1.2 million in taxes if you account for inflation. Okay? $1.2 million. Well, I would personally think that money's better off in my pocket than the government's. So even if you don't feel that you're earning enough to justify the cost of getting proper financial advice and tax structuring, I beg to differ.
I'd also say this. Don't be too proud to not get help, because Shaq and we get help, right? And one of the reasons I do is because I'm too close to it.
Sure.
In your own situation, there's sometimes I've been in a situation where something's staring me right in the face, but I cannot see it.
Sometimes you just need a second set of eyes.
Exactly. And the beauty is that we can work as a team, right? And bounce ideas around. I mean, our poor accountant, one of them at the moment that we've been working with, when we've been on the phone to him, I don't know how many times over the last few months, and he's been gracious enough to take our calls at odd times. But that's the beauty of pay the expert the extra amount so that you have that freedom to get the best result that you're trying to.
We often talk about this. It's about, creating the freedom so you can actually live your life purpose. Okay?
But you got to understand the system that you're in to do that.
Absolutely. Now, somebody actually contacted Edge with, they were basically pretty angry. Okay, and they said that they didn't.
Sorry, said they're basically what? Sorry,
they were very angry. Okay,
they're very angry. Okay, yeah,
yes,
yeah, they were a Karen.
They didn't. They were total Karen mode. because she said that she didn't want to support anything that she said, I don't understand. This doesn't seem to be about freedom because, you're promoting shows about wealth and about cryptocurrency. So to me, it just seems to be about that. And I'm thinking, wow, we've got so many shows on health and wellness and personal power and this and that and all sorts of things, but you could narrow down on that. That's why we have these shows, because honestly, this education, whether it be in the fiat system, whether it be, the greater wealth here, or whether it be a crypto show, these are ways of getting out of the matrix, if you like. These are ways of actually creating that freedom. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you do need money to buy freedom. It's not free, right? You do actually need
Everything comes with a cost.
Absolutely. So when we have shows like this is because we want freedom for people. We want to give people the tools, or to give them the information so they will seek out the education, so they can find their purpose and actually have the freedom to go and create lives in those endeavors.
And let me throw another question out to you. How many other radio shows would actually give you an opportunity to not directly interact, but send messages through and talk to people on a regular basis with people of Shaq and Derek's caliber, who have actually been ingrained into these systems, have been dealing with the major corporations and all that sort of stuff, and actually understand the ins and outs and what they actually do? So,
well, it kind of comes down to what Trump said. Okay, now I say, look, my feelings of Trump are quite complex, right? Some parts I absolutely love, some parts drive me nuts.
You love his hair, don't you?
Oh, it's all about his hair. It's all about the hair
and the tan.
Thanks, mate. Now, but what I was going to say about Trump, and this is amazing. How did a billionaire win over everyday Americans? I'll tell you right now, because when he stood up and said, I know the system's rigged because I use it. Right. Yeah. Now, when he did that, I mean, he let the biggest secret out there that we all knew was there. Right. And he resonated with the everyday American. That's a very important thing.
My personal belief is that's what painted the target on him.
I thoroughly agree. So shows like this and other things that we do, and I think is incredibly important. And things like Blu Sky Factory. And as I say, I will pump up your tires all the time, mate.
Oh, Damien, I love that comment.
I think your courses are fantastic. I think that they open a lot of people's eyes. It certainly opened my eyes. Okay.
Thank you.
So from that point of view, no, I was asleep. So no.
He snored his whole way through.
Thank you very much. But this is the way. You need to purchase your freedom. Okay. Sorry to say it, but that's a great thing.
I've got to bring this comment up that Damien's put in.
Yes.
Schools don't teach any students about money, budgeting, etc.
No,
They also don't teach about politics and the
Yep.
systems that you're stuck in. So you have to understand this. And I think the big saver for our modern generation is actually the internet. Because the ability to be able to get information, as much as they try to censor it, there's always ways around that.
But you can
always get into stuff.
Okay.
You can get the knowledge you need. So back in the 1940s and 1930s, and before the internet was readily available, if you wanted to find something out about the financial system, you either had to talk to someone, you had to send a telegram, you had to trust the news.
Sure.
God, have a look at what happened with the War of the Worlds. Look how many people panicked over that, not realizing it was a TV show. So that just shows radio show.
Yeah.
That just shows how
the power of radio,
how powerful genuine radio was. Oh, anyway, sorry, I suggested dig out, Aaron.
When I was at Trinity Grammar in Sydney, we were taught how to write a check and like how to cross the check, not negotiable, and all that sort of stuff. Now, granted that people don't write checks anymore, so no point teaching that. But surely teaching people some basic life skills would be a good thing for a school curriculum. But I do want to respond to the person who wrote in about this show. Yeah, look, this show is more focused on wealth. I think the network or the radio station in whole overall is focused on freedom. This is more about wealth and how to grow it and how to perhaps take advantage of the fact that because the government's in your life so much, the first thing you can do is to try to release some of that tax money that you're paying so you can put that money into assets, and then certain ways that you can start to build a future for yourself so that you're not reliant on the government when you get older. We don't know, like in the United States, for example, Social Security, the Social Security trust funds aren't going to have enough money to pay everybody at the same age. That's why they're increasing the age of retirement. That's why they're reducing benefits, etc. So if you're relying on government to look after you, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult position. I think that you've lost a lot of freedom. But also just on a personal note for me, I'm very proud of Australia. I love Australians, and I deeply love the Five Eyes countries of the world. I have a great respect and admiration for Switzerland. Why? because Switzerland gave me an opportunity that I couldn't get here in Australia. I tried for years and years and years to try to get myself, running a hedge fund or something like that, and I just couldn't navigate the landscape here. And I was able to go to Switzerland after being headhunted over there, and I was set up very, very quickly. So what that opened my eyes to is that if you can't find the opportunities in your home country, maybe you should look elsewhere and then come back, right? But the point is that you need to understand all these things in order to have the freedom to say, well, what can I do? How am I possibly going to have the best quality of life that I can possibly have? And that's the way that you do it.